The Federal Reserve cutting interest rates yesterday by 50 basis points. That's half a percentage. Now, that means, of course, all your loans are going to be a little bit cheaper. That's a good thing for the millions of Americans who find themselves in that situation. But is there something else going on here? Was this the right move for the Federal Reserve? I'm Pete Mundo, and we are here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Happy Thursday morning. I don't believe this is political from Jerome Powell. I don't believe that Jerome Powell is trying to rig the game on behalf of Kamala Harris. That's not what I think is going on here. I know a lot of people wanted to jump to that conclusion. I don't buy it. I believe it could be something worse. What it could be is Jerome Powell reading the tea leaves, seeing something going on in this economy, and coming to the conclusion that I've got to cut interest rates by, instead of 1/4 of a point, which is what was being discussed, half a point, to potentially get ahead of more economic pain in 2025. And Powell made it very clear yesterday that cutting rates by half a point, well, that is not, and it does not have anything to do with the new pace. It's just a one-time thing that we had to do right now. Here's Fed Chair Jerome Powell at his press conference yesterday.
I do not think that anyone should look at this and say, oh, this is the new pace. You have to think about it in terms of the base case. Of course, what happens will happen. So in the base case, what you see is, look at the SEP. You see cuts moving along. The sense of this is we're recalibrating policy down over time to a more neutral level. And we're moving at the pace that we think is appropriate.
So he's not saying, hey, we're getting half a point cut here. We're going to cut by half a point coming up again in a couple months. That's not what Jerome Powell is insinuating. What I read into those comments as is a guy who says, hey, I cut half a point right now, and we may not cut until 2025 if we have to at all. Maybe we hold this thing where it is. But I know we're sitting here 6-7 weeks before an election, and people want to jump on this, and they want to say, there he is, Powell. See, Powell's trying to get Kamala in the office. Well, he was brought in by Trump, number one. But number two, if anything, it's an admission that maybe the Fed should have cut by 1/4 point back in July. And then if they had cut by 1/4 point now, we'd be at the same place that we are today. Will there be a little bit of economic, or I should say, excitement on Main Street? Maybe. Are people now going to be looking to refi, possibly from their high rates, or look at their credit card debt, recalibrate that, car loans, whatever it might be? Possibly. But it still is not a massive decrease from where we were. What this is an admission of, to me, is the Fed realizing that Main Street has had much more pain than the media has talked about and that Wall Street has shown. We've all seen what the stock market has done, and it's largely been driven by our major tech stocks. That's been a large part of the gains on Wall Street for the last few years. But meantime, on Main Street, you've got a very different economy. And this is Jerome Powell admitting that despite the fact that many in media won't talk about it, there is real pain on Main Street. Hiring has slowed tremendously. Yes, inflation has come down. It still is not at that 2% number where it needs to be, but still, you've stacked inflation numbers on inflation numbers for the last 4 years, and that's how you end up in the situation we're in, with inflation being 20% cumulative over the last 4 years, which has just crushed small businesses and crushed Main Street. Now, one of the most overlooked parts of yesterday's press conference by the Fed chair is how he admitted the illegal immigration crisis that has been created by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is having an impact on the unemployment number and is having an impact on the job market at large.
On the job creation, it depends on the inflows, right? So if you're having millions of people come into the labor force, then and you're creating 100,000 jobs, you're going to see unemployment go up. So it really depends on what's the trend underlying the volatility of people coming into the country. We understand there's been quite an influx across the borders, and that has actually been one of the things that's allowed unemployment rate to rise. And the other thing is just the slower hiring rate.
So more people, slower hiring, not ideal for an economy, right? That's why you can love immigration. We all come from immigrants in this country, right? You can love immigrants. You can love immigration. You can want them to love America. I do. I know you do as well. But you have to do it in a manner that works for the country. That does not flood the country with people who then, in turn, can't get jobs and need government assistance. That is not a sustainable model. And that's the model that this White House has preferred over the last 3.5 years. And it doesn't work out unless you want to create a permanent underclass and try to make them in the voters as quickly as possible, unless that's your end game, in which case you're doing a great job. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But for those of us who just want to see, hey, solid immigration to America, knowing that we do need the help in the labor market, we do need the help with certain jobs, but doing it in a way that is sustainable for the country and safe for the American people who are currently in the country. That's like, whoa, that's some radical stuff. And it's really not radical stuff. At least it shouldn't be perceived as radical stuff. So the Fed's decision yesterday, lowering rates for the first time since 2020, is a sign of not what's happening right now. I don't think it has a massive impact on this election at all. And I didn't really hear any of that from Trump. He did a big rally last night in New York out on Long Island. But it's more about what could be happening in 2025, when there could be more economic pain on the horizon. And then that leads to the question of who of these two is better suited to handle that issue. Who of the two people right now running to be your next president do you trust in that environment to take over and lead the country out of potentially more economic pain than what we've dealt with the last 3.5 years? Because the one part of the last 3.5 years has been a pretty darn strong labor market, which for all the debt Americans are racking up has allowed them to at least make their payments on this debt, right? To the point where they're not sinking. They're not underwater. It's not 2008 or anything close to it. But if you get a softening of the labor market to the point where you see issues a la 2008, I'm not predicting it. I don't want it. I'm not saying it's going to happen right now. But if you get that, that's where you potentially enter some kind of a crisis mode. And I wonder, as we sit here on a Thursday morning, how much of that economic pain may be forecast from Jerome Powell's perspective as he sits there as the Fed chair and bumps this thing down by 0.5% yesterday, bringing rates down to 4.9% down from a 2-decade high. But I suppose if you've been waiting for that chance on the refi or waiting to maybe move some things around on that front, you know what? Yeah, pretty good right now for you, all things considered. 913-408-7957 as we get it rolling on a Thursday morning on KCMO. We have Mayor Quinton Lucas this morning. Liz Klayman from the Fox Business Network is going to react to Powell's decision just after 7 here on KCMO. And in the 8 o'clock hour, we are going to have on a business owner who has called out the mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas. Betty Ray's owner is coming on this show, and he is fed up with the crime. He is fed up with the issues in this town, and he is now speaking out on social media. And he will be on this show this morning to speak out about it further. What did he post on social media that got him a lot of publicity last night? We'll share that with you next here on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. Betty Ray's Ice Cream Shop, one of our favorites here in Kansas City. It was right down the block from us when we were living downtown there at the River Market spot. And now they've got a new spot there off K10. Have you been to that one yet, Mark? You been out there to Betty Ray's?
Yeah, I think it opened last year after a soccer game that Brielle had, so we went there and checked it out.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So their owner put up a post that went viral on LinkedIn. He did share it to Facebook as well. Matt Shato. He writes here, Come on, Quentin Lucas. Kansas City can do better. As an owner of numerous small businesses around the metro, your city is the only one that on a daily basis we wonder if our staff is going to be safe and our assets protected. You talk to one part of the city and they suggest there's not enough jail space. You talk to the police department, they suggest they don't have enough police officers. You talk to others within the city and you're told the prosecutor is not prosecuting crimes of this type. You were elected due to your perceived leadership ability. As a business owner in your community, I'm asking what you're doing to lead on this issue. Providing local businesses money to fortify their doors is not the answer. All of our conversations this morning within our community have been about what we as private citizens can do to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into cameras on the streets, additional security presence on the private side. We pay taxes for public safety, but we are not safe in public. If we're going to be responsible for providing our own public safety, then simply give us a rebate on those taxes and stop pretending like we're getting something for these dollars. You walk around, he writes to Quentin Lucas, with 2 security guards at a time. I've seen you numerous times in the airport with such. But we can't even get a police presence in the River Market for a considerable number of businesses that I would argue are just as important as you are? Well, I am posting this and complaining about the reality of our situation and the fact that we were broken into last night. I'm also the first person that will suggest I'm willing to be involved in finding a solution if indeed our community is looking for one. Let's stop ignoring what's going on here, passing the buck to everyone else, and actually do something to protect the business owners, the citizens, the staff that come from other jurisdictions to work in Kansas City, as well as all our constituents' assets. And then he shared a picture of the break-in that took place 2 nights ago at about 11:26 in the evening on Tuesday. And that is Matt Chateau. He owns Betty Ray's Ice Cream Shop, and he is going to be on the show, by the way, in the 8 o'clock hour here on KCMO, so make sure you're listening then to what he has to say. The only thing he got wrong here in this post is when he said that the business owners and the businesses are just as important as the mayor. They are more important than the mayor. And that's not a knock on the mayor. I would say that about a Republican mayor. It's not about Republican versus Democrat. Businesses are more important than politicians. Let's be very clear. Politicians work for businesses. Politicians work for the private sector taxpayer, the businesses that pay taxes that fund the government. We're in this weird space right now where we forget that politicians of all political parties work for us. We do not serve them. We are not lucky to have them in our lives. We should not feel like they are here to really fix anything for us. They are here to do the basics and hopefully do it well. And the basics are basically fix the potholes, keep the roads clean, provide us some level of public safety, and, okay, fine, there's a lot of tax dollars that go to our public schools. That's about it. That's the extent of what they need to be involved in and what they really need to be focused on. And one of the major pillars in Kansas City has been a failure on that front, and of course, that is public safety. And this is not new, but it does feel like we're in a place where more small business owners are willing to say stuff like this on social media and call it out. Now, amazingly, you still have a cowardly Chamber of Commerce in this town that will not do anything on this front, and I will ask Matt about that when he comes up on the show at 8 o'clock. But we are in a place where more so than ever, you are seeing people speak out, speak up, finally say enough is enough. Unfortunately, it's taking their own businesses being broken into to get us to this point, John.
Yeah, when I was a kid, sometimes the paper might have spoken out.
Yeah, we might have had a newspaper say something, right?
I remember the good old days.
The good old days of having a paper of record that called it both ways, called it straight, but those days, unfortunately, are long gone. So now, thanks to social media, for all the negatives of social media, and trust me, there are many negatives of social media, one of the positives is posts like this from the owner of Betty Ray's is driving this conversation today in this town. He doesn't have to go around and beg the TV networks to say, look at me, please, tell my story. He can tell his own story. He can tell his own story. But here's what's amazing. Some of the top comments on LinkedIn are really embarrassing to the owner of Betty Ray's. You've got people saying, the mayor of Kansas City is just one member of the Board of Police Commissioners. There's only so much he can do. Now, that is true to a degree. But the best thing that Quinton Lucas can do is use his bully pulpit and use his platform. And that's one thing we've advocated for a very long time. And that is for reversing the course on backing law enforcement. If there's one thing I could have had Quinton Lucas do in hindsight using his bully pulpit, what would it be? It would have been years ago to get with Jean Peters Baker and call out the nonsense lack of prosecution, her preference to go after cops than criminals, and say enough's enough. I'm not going to have it. For the interests of the safety of this community, I'm not going to have it. And guess what? If you want to get into a tit for tat with me, fine, we can do that. But you're going to stop doing this nonsense where you do this woke-a-doke, rope-a-dope with criminals in this town, in this county, and you're going to prosecute. And guess what? If you need jail space, we're going to find it. Might not be in Jackson County, might not be in Kansas City, but we're going to find it. We're not going to use that as a damn excuse anymore in this town. And that was the biggest missed opportunity in this entire conversation over the last several years. 913-408-7957. John's on KCMO. What's happening, John?
Good morning, sir. Hey, on a larger scale, this is a microcosm of it, it became not what was right, not what was wrong, not what was acceptable, unacceptable. It became what was the political oomph behind it. And then once that started happening, the politicians and the people who vote for them, because you look at them and you go, you voted for this. You put in Quinton Lucas. You voted for this DA. You voted for these people who told you through their actions and their words exactly what they're going to do. And they did it. And now all of a sudden there's this big surprise. How did this happen? Oh, my gosh. Well, It happened because you allowed it. Unacceptable became acceptable. Bad behavior became explained away. Well, it's not really Johnny's fault that he shot 4 people. Johnny should have never had access to the gun. Mm-hmm. Wait, and then people believe in this. It's the same thing. You transfer it over to the economy, transfer it everywhere else. Unacceptable has become acceptable. Standards have fallen. Look at schools. Same thing.
Yep.
And it's
well
all
said.
under this, we can call it wokeism, but it's all under this. You got to feel good about yourself, Pete.
Yep. Thank you, John.
Feel good.
I appreciate it, buddy. That is very well said. The Teamsters are not backing the Democrat for president of the United States. Whoa! Woo! How about that? Good morning, 635. Thanks for being here on KCMO 95.7 FM. The Teamsters Union has declined to endorse Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. And a lot of people are like, yay, go Teamsters, nice job. I think their leadership is still cowardly. Because they shared this public poll that they did with about 21,000 of their members. And it showed overwhelmingly that their supporters endorse and like Donald Trump by about 20 points over Kamala Harris. If you were the Teamsters Union and your job is to represent your people, and your people overwhelmingly support Donald Trump, why aren't you? It's weird to me that I've seen like Republicans and Trump supporters take this as some big win. It's still problematic that when they talk to their own people and their own people say by a 20-point margin, we want Donald Trump, almost a 30-point margin, by the way. Their most recent poll that they showed from the Teamsters Union that was conducted last week showed 58% for Trump, 31% for Harris, 6% undecided, 5% don't know, and they're living under a rock. 58-31, 30 points, basically. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna stay out of this one. Really? I mean, it's not like Trump's up by 5. It's not like you're within the margin of error. It's basically 2-1. And the Teamsters decide instead that they're not going to endorse. Now, I don't think it's a big deal that they don't, but these unions have always been in the back pockets of the Democratic Party. That's been the case forever. And it's mostly been because the leadership has been in the back pockets of the Democratic Party. Despite the fact that the working man and woman has been coming over to the Republican side of the aisle overwhelmingly, especially over the last couple of election cycles. So now for the Teamsters Union to poll their own people and see basically 2-1 they like Trump over Harris, and they're like, you know what? We're just going to stay out of it this time. Is that something to, praise them for? I don't think so.
Today's word is Teflon.
Yeah. Here's the official statement yesterday from the Teamsters Union. For the past year, the Teamsters Union has pledged to conduct the most inclusive, democratic, and transparent presidential endorsement process in the history of our 121-year-old organization. And today we are delivering on that promise to our members. Really? Are you delivering? Our members of the union and their voices and opinions must be at the forefront of everything the Teamsters do. Well, clearly not. That's clearly not the case here at all. 2-1 Trump over Harris, and they're like, you know what? We're just going to stay out of it. Yep, we're going to decline to endorse ahead of the November presidential election, and no thanks. We'll stay out of this one. Huh. That's interesting. Now, you go back 4 years, and Joe Biden had the lead over Donald Trump in the Teamsters Union's internal polling. Biden was up 44-36 over Donald Trump, according to the union. And what did they do? Well, they came out and they endorsed Joe Biden. Wow. So now Trump has a much larger lead this time around, and they say, yeah, we'll just we'll stay out of this one. We're going to, not endorse anybody. That's really too bad. Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters president, saying in his statement, unfortunately, neither major candidate was able to make serious commitments to our union to ensure the interests of working people are always put before big business. And that's why, I'm not too concerned about this, because this guy, Sean O'Brien, I know he talks a good game like he did at the RNC, but in the end, he's still a lot more like Bernie Sanders than he is anything else. And that's unfortunately how a lot of these union thugs are. They're not actually about the working man or the actual union member. They're kind of more about these big, progressive government policies that they think are going to ultimately bail them out, not what actually is in the best interest of the working person. But here was Sean O'Brien recently on Face the Nation on CBS talking about this very thing.
I'm going to say this. Whatever the critics out there, and they're very few in the leadership, whenever I get an opportunity to highlight the American worker, especially the Teamster worker, I'm going to take any and all venue. We asked both conventions respectively at the same time, and the Republican National Convention immediately responded to us, didn't try and edit any of our messages, and I was hopeful that the Democrats would do the same, but they didn't. I'm not upset about it, but I can tell you this, my rank and file members who have been lifelong Democrats are not happy about it.
And that's in reference to the fact that the Democrats didn't want Sean O'Brien to be part of their DNC week. This after he was part of the RNC week in Milwaukee. So Sean O'Brien adding in a statement yesterday, this is the Teamsters president after they elected not to endorse a Democrat for the first time in over 30 years. We saw commitments from both Trump and Harris not to interfere in critical union campaigns or core Teamster industries and to honor our members' right to strike, but we were unable to secure those pledges. And I will say this, good on Trump for not bowing down to Sean O'Brien. The members are with Trump, 2-1. In this day and age, just like celebrity endorsements mean less and less, heck, Taylor Swift, I know people are going to be like, oh, look how many people registered to vote. I don't believe it moves the needle. In fact, as polling showed last week, more people were turned off by Taylor Swift's endorsement than were actually turned on and excited about it. That's what the polling showed, and we shared that with you last week. In this world of social media, in this world where everybody can interact with everybody, the celebrity endorsement means a lot less, And I think that the Teamsters or any union's head honchos endorsements mean less because people are able to do their own research in a way that they weren't able to even, as recently as a couple of presidential cycles ago. They know what's going on. They know what they're living through. They don't need to sit there blindly and be like, well, my union president suggests, the guy who, oversees the 1.3 million person union, who doesn't know me from a hole in the wall, says I should go vote for Kamala Harris, so I will blindly go do that, despite the fact that I believe it's against my own interests. Those days are generally over. Now, I know there's money that would come with some kind of a endorsement from like the Teamsters Union, and that's usually been the sticking point in all this, the way that the parties, oftentimes the Democratic Party, has aligned with these unions, and they've gotten the union workers dollars to try to get more Democrats elected, and that's a whole different scheme that's been going on for far too long. But in this case, they're just not endorsing. They're staying out of it. And I'm not going to praise them for it. I'm just going to say at least they're listening to their members enough to not continue to blindly endorse one side of the political aisle when it's not even close to where the workers are at today. And when you do a poll of 21,000 Teamsters members and they go 2-1 for Trump, at least they're smart enough. Not smart, but at least they're smart enough to come to the conclusion that maybe we'll stay out of this one. Maybe we'll actually follow the lead of our members and stay out of this thing. 913-408-7957. I know there's many of you that are obviously in that world, maybe a member of the Teamsters Union, but this is true for unions across the board. I think they've got to mostly stay out of this political arena because for a couple of generations now, most unions have just blindly followed one side of the political aisle. But now, as we see this realignment of the political parties, which is what's happening, right? You're seeing much more of a working class mentality in the Republican Party and much more of an elitist identification in the Democratic Party. As that continues to realign itself, these unions have to be very careful. 913-408-7957. Pete, at least the Teamsters didn't go against their members like the UAW president did. Fair, but that's a very low bar. Because Shawn Fain, the head of the UAW, is the classic quintessential union leader thug. That's what Shawn Fain is from the UAW. I love the way the media covers these stories as well when it comes to like the Teamsters Union declining to endorse a Democrat for the first time in over 30 years. Here's the headline from The Guardian. Teamsters decline to endorse election candidate, but claim majority backs Trump. Claim. As if like, it might not actually be true, but we are claiming based on our polling. So 21,000 people were in this poll by the Teamsters Union that showed Donald Trump with the rank and file up 58-31 over Kamala Harris. 21,000 out of 1.3 million. Like that's a big sample size. You look at some of the polls that we talk about for the upcoming election, it's like 1,000 people sometimes in a country of 330 million people. And we take those things somewhat seriously. Maybe we shouldn't, but we do. 21,000 out of 1.3 million, that's a pretty damn good sample size. And The Guardian, but claims majority backs Donald Trump. John's in Topeka. John, you're on KCMO. What's happening?
Hey, good morning. Benzie, you're talking about this story, something that a buddy of mine and I noticed at the north end of Fairfax there, the UAW hall, the United Auto Workers, usually right this time of year during election cycle, they have so many signs out there, it looks like they could build 3 cars out of the metal and plastic they got sitting in the front yard, and it's blank. There's not a single sign out there.
So you're saying they could put up political signs and they're choosing not to?
Yes. Usually it was so thick in there, it was just like, oh, my God, look at the weeds, you know. But anyhow, but there it's completely blank. And something else we noticed, there is a very, very much of a lack of political signs all around the area. And the only ones I really see up are for Senator Rick Clues. And they're all over the place. He's working to get people's vote. But as for everybody else, I see one Tim Walz sign, whatever, Walz-Harris sign, and a few Trump signs, but not very much else out and around out there. And I drive all over the place.
And where was this again? Sorry.
What's that?
Where was this again?
The Tim Waltz, the Waltz hair sign.
Yeah.
In my neighborhood down the street from my house. And
Oh.
I wanted to put a sign up with Forrest Gump saying, "Are you stupid or something?"
Well, listen, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it just kind of stumbled upon his front lawn and he doesn't know what's going on, so he put it up. He'd like the colors or something. Give him some,
Well,
give him
everybody's
a break.
entitled to their opinion, but at least I know that I have one dumb neighbor in my neighborhood.
Yeah. I'm sure you got more than that, John, okay?
Probably. I'm probably one of them. So
I wonder, it brings up an interesting point. I wonder if we'll see fewer yard signs than ever before this year. Like, just in general. Not that people aren't going to go vote, but I do wonder, and that's an interesting spin-off of this conversation, how many people are just going to be like, Trump's been there now 3 presidential cycles in a row. Maybe you've done it in the past, and you say to yourself, okay, well, do I need to put up another sign again? Like, who are you really convincing with a yard sign? Genuinely curious. In a 50-50 country, what's the point of the yard sign? Who are you convincing? What's the purpose of it? It doesn't, tell you a message. It's not like yard signs say, Donald Trump will do such and such. Kamala Harris will do such and such. It's literally just their name. There's no way to compel you to switch your vote or reach an undecided voter with some policy stance. It doesn't accomplish anything.
It's more like, if there's a Trump sign, it's we believe in MAGA. If it's Kamala sign, we believe in word salad.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just kind of showing what your principles are. MAGA versus word salad. Peace and prosperity versus chaos. Maybe that's what it's all about. I don't know. But I've only put up 1 yard sign in my life. And it's a little bit different because I literally do this every day. So I get to tell people what I think on a daily basis. So I don't feel the need to do it through a yard sign. But the only yard sign we've ever put up is a yard sign for a city council member that I wanted to get rid of. So I put up a sign for that person's opponent. And that was 3 years ago, 2021 is when I put up that yard sign. And the person that was running against the incumbent was a friend. And he said, hey, would you put a yard sign up? That I kind of get because the city council races, no one really knows who's who. So you put up a yard sign, it's oh, yeah, okay, I've seen that name around. That kind of makes sense. But when it comes to Trump and Harris, who are you convincing? What are we doing? 913-408-7957. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I know there's a lot of people that are very enthusiastic about that, but I just genuinely wonder, if it's more about you, and that's fine if it is. But if it's more about you than it is trying to convince somebody else of something. Because I don't know anybody who's ever been convinced to vote for a presidential candidate by a yard sign. But if you want it to be part of your identification, more power to you. That's great. That's awesome. But let's not pretend some undecided voter is going to drive by your house and be boy, that yard sign looked good. I'm turning the corner. I'm voting for that guy. On the text line, Pete, I'm a 30-year Teamster here. We're about 58%, as that poll says, for Donald Trump. But I would say here in Kansas City, when it comes to the Teamsters union members, we're about 80% for Donald Trump across the Kansas City area. I'm not surprised by that in the least. I mean, that's why Sean O'Brien's got to realize, hey, listen, the way that we're going to do this is just stay out of it. Okay. On the text line, Pete, a lot of Kamala Harris signs in Prairie Village, Fairway, and Brookside. Are you serious? Is that right? It's a reminder why I haven't been over there in a while. But I'll have to do a little drive-by here in the next couple of weeks and maybe see what's going on.
So I was going to say, knock me over with a feather.
Can't believe it. Oh, my gosh.
Talk about a bombshell.
I just thought that they would maybe wake up a little bit and at least avoid the yard
they're
sign.
Insulated from it all.
I know. I just, gosh, you're right, John. You're right. I still have that little bit of youthful optimism. John's just got the old man. Of course it was going to be this way mentality.
Hop on the pendulum, Pete. It'll swing back soon.
I know. But you think in Brookside, of all places, where they're getting just killed, literally and figuratively, by the way, by these policies on a local level, you'd think they wouldn't want that on a national level. But, boy, it's tough to teach an old dog new tricks. I'll just say that much. What a ridiculous description of what happened on Tuesday night at the Lenexa City Council meeting where they voted against turning the La Quinta Inn and Suites into a homeless shelter. The headline here from KCTV5 reads, Lenexa City Council passes the buck on combating homelessness. You have got to be kidding me. Passes the buck on combating homelessness. How about this? If you're somebody who doesn't allow a homeless guy to stay in your spare bedroom, you are passing the buck on combating homelessness. How do you like that? Chew on that one for a second. That's basically what they're saying. Same thing, right?
Every time you walk by a Salvation Army bell ringer this holiday season.
You are passing the buck. Yep. That's what you're doing. That's the headline from Channel 5. The story reads as follows. Lenexa will miss out. This is great, too. Lenexa will miss out on a little over $10 million because the city council voted 5-2 to deny a special use permit application from Restart to turn the La Quinta Inn and former Denny's on Lenexa Drive into a homeless shelter. Yeah, they're missing out on $10 million. Oh, my goodness. Okay, I'm going to have a government official walk up to your front door. Hello? Anyone home? All right. You there? Okay, great. You're there. I'm going to have the government offer you $2,000 a month to have a homeless guy in your spare bedroom. Oh, you don't want it? You don't think that's good for your family? You don't think that's safe for your family? You don't know who the person's going to be, by the way? Well, you're turning down $2,000 a month. Come on now. You're really going to turn down $2,000 a month? What a ridiculous notion. And by the way, Lenexa wasn't going to get $10 million as I understand it. The guy who owned the La Quinta Inn, whoever owned the La Quinta Inn was going to get the money, right? I mean, someone had to buy the property. Man, that is just next level gaslighting. I'm sorry. That is just incredibly biased journalism, if it even is journalism. The article goes on to say here from KCTV, roughly 2/3 of the money would have come from federal COVID funds that Johnson County has to find a home for before the end of the year. There's so much there to dissect. First off, the fact that we are sitting here in September of 2024 talking about COVID funds is a freaking joke. Everything when it comes to spending money around COVID, in large part, was a joke. This is a reminder of that complete and utter joke. And by the way, why should that matter here? Why should Lenexa be forced into a homeless shelter that's a low-barrier shelter, meaning you don't know who's coming and going, you can't ask, you don't know even if they're citizens, never mind Johnson County residents, in a bad location where residents and business owners have voiced incredible displeasure and disappointment in this potential proposal, and say, well, you know, we got to spend this money that the government just printed out of thin air that doesn't actually exist anywhere, that helped deflate or devalue, I should say, our currency. So, you know what? Fine. Just put the shelter there. It's okay. We'll just, not go to that Quick Trip and avoid the Oak Park Mall and everything else because there's nowhere to actually go in that area when it comes to things for homeless people to do or, try to do or want to do. I can't believe that's the approach that they're taking on this. The article goes on to say, Restart Chief Executive Officer Stephanie Boyer has been working to convince the council and the community in Johnson County of the benefits behind housing the homeless in Johnson County, but to no avail. Stephanie Boyer telling KCTV5, as tired and exhausted as we might be, and as this has been, I always just think about how tired and exhausted people are living on the street day in, day out. On my most exhausted days, that's what I think about.
Me.
Yeah.
It's all about me.
Oh, man. Pity me. I'm tired, but I'm really just here working on my most exhausted days for the homeless persons. Man, It's amazing. I didn't think I'd see coverage like this in the wake of that shelter news on Tuesday night. But this is really what it's about for too many. By the way, it's like the Restart folks wrote this piece. It really is. As if they weren't going to get a windfall as well from the taxpayer in Johnson County and from every single municipality who is being asked to kick in tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a yearly basis for this. For 50 rooms. 50 rooms. It's comical. So, yeah, I will go to the homes of these folks. I'll offer them $2,000 a month to house a homeless person. And when they pass the buck, I'll say, wow, boy, you really are passing the buck and combating homelessness, aren't you? 9:05, we got the rain falling now down in Corporate Woods. Good morning. Happy Thursday. Thanks for joining us on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. We have the Trans-Siberian Orchestra tickets coming up in 10 minutes. Hang tight for that on KCMO. All right, we got that coming up right around the corner. So our First Lady of Kansas City is Brittany Mahomes. And did you hear the disparaging remarks that Sonny Hostin of The View made about Brittany Mahomes yesterday? I know you didn't because you probably don't watch The View.
Talk about a bombshell.
And to be clear, neither do I. But, you know, I get clips from The View sent to me, and I can't avoid it. So take a listen to this. This is just as really, it's really gross. I don't know what other word to use. But it's really gross when you have comments like this being made about Brittany Mahomes on The View because she had the audacity to like a Donald Trump post on Instagram. Take a listen.
But to your initial point, I know you said we weren't going to talk about it, but I was. It just seems to me that since she is in an interracial marriage, she should have known that to support a racist is problematic. Her children are biracial, and her family is one of the families that in the 70s could not have lived in any of Donald Trump's buildings. So it just seems to me that maybe she's just not that politically savvy, or maybe she's just not read in.
Granted,
but it's
all we know is that she liked a Trump post. We don't know. She hasn't stated that she supported him, but that's fair to interpret that she may have. But we don't know that she's a supporter.
Okay. Wow. Sonny Hostin, it's really wrong of Brittany Mahomes to support a racist, she says, when her kids are biracial. Well, thanks for telling her, by the way. She probably didn't know that. And that, of course, her husband also happens to be biracial. Is there anything grosser than what you've just heard? I mean, that is a new low for a show that is complete and utter trash for the most part. But even for them, with their low standard and very low bar, they amazingly continue to lower it, John, with comments like that.
Well, the pathetic part about it is maybe she doesn't know.
Yeah, I know.
That's what pisses me off, that kind of crap from them.
It's
in-house.
It's so obnoxious. It's so elitist.
She probably just doesn't realize.
Yes. And this is what they do. And they've been doing this, by the way, for a while with the reshifting and recalibrating of the political parties. As you have seen, especially working class voters of Hispanic descent and also Black Americans, especially younger working class Black Americans, consider or move towards the Republican Party, you get multimillionaire TV personalities trying to shame them. Now, Brittany Mahomes, to her credit, is not going to be shamed. But this is happening on a fairly regular basis now because it scares the bejesus out of these people that they no longer have their stranglehold on minority voters. I mean, Kamala Harris was asked about this a couple of days ago at the National Association of Black Journalists event.
But polling shows that some black men, particularly young black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question.
in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And
Okay. Well, I seem to recall a time 4 years ago. That's the right answer from Kamala Harris. How genuine is it? I don't know. But I seem to recall a time 4 years ago when the guy who's currently still in the White House, I know we kind of forget this sometimes, said this.
You have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Yes. Yeah, we got to make sure that we don't take anybody's vote for granted. Okay. Well, that's true, but that's kind of been the attitude for the most part for going on 60 years now. And when someone like Brittany Mahomes, the first lady of Kansas City, Brittany Mahomes, frankly, the first lady of the NFL, bucks their trend, doesn't play by their rules, doesn't fit their narrative. They basically call her a racist against her own children. In one of the more disgusting takes that you are going to hear in media this week. Stephen's in Johnson County. Stephen, you're on KCMO. Good morning.
Hey, Doc, how's it going?
What's happening, my man?
All right. Listen, they did the same thing to me when I went to the conservative movement. Some of the organizations that were Democrats that I sit with for a number of years, they called me Uncle Tom. They called me a Clarence Thomas and a Ben Carson. I understand exactly how that feels.
By the way, is it supposed to be an insult to call you Clarence Thomas when he's one of the most brilliant guys in America, or Ben Carson, one of the most successful, smart people in the country?
Exactly.
I'm just wondering if that's meant to be an insult or not.
And if they knew what Uncle Tom really was, they wouldn't say it, But that's the ignorance that goes on with their community, and then they wonder why they don't have anything. I wanted to tell you this. The other week, I challenged some pastors, some African American pastors in the Urban Core. I asked them to come on your show and explain to you why Kamala Harris is qualified to do the job. I said she sat in the senator for a number of years and never passed one bill, never sponsored one bill. So I asked them, I said, well, can you come on the Pete Mundo show to explain why she would make a good candidate? And all of them refused to do it.
Really? Well, thank you for playing Booker for the show there, Stephen. I genuinely appreciate that. By the way,
I want you to have him on there.
Well, I would love to. Stephen, I know you know this. I would put him on the air tomorrow.
Okay, I'll set it up. I'll ask any pastor I can think of, and I'll call him and ask him.
Were they? By the way, were they familiar with the show?
Some of them were, but some of them wouldn't.
Okay. All right. Well, we're making inroads, my man. We're getting there.
Okay. All right.
Hey, thank you for the booking job there, Stephen. Keep me posted, okay?
No problem.
All right. There you go. Stephen in Johnson County on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. It's good to have you here on a Thursday morning. Listen, that's exactly it. And it actually ties into a poll that Fox News put out yesterday. They put out their new national poll for Trump and Harris, and I think they had Harris up 2 in their national poll. So this is really interesting. Trump and Harris voters give wildly different reasons for supporting their respective candidates. 72% of people who support Trump say, I like his record and policies. 19% say, I dislike Harris. 8% say, I like Trump's character. I'm about to vote for Trump for a third time. I'm not sure who the 8% are on that front, but neither here nor there. The people who say they support Kamala Harris, only 42% say it's because they like her record and policies. That's 30 points below Trump. 33% who support Kamala Harris do so because they dislike Trump. And then 24% say it's because they like her character. So the people that support Trump like his policies. The people who support Harris basically have Trump derangement syndrome. That's the conclusion.